Never find where you are. Won't be 'cause I never see why you're so afraid that you are away from me. You're so afraid that you are away from me.
Hi, this is Stacy returning with Stigma Does Not Define Us from MENTELL Health. Thank you so much for joining us again. Today we have the meditating Viking, also called David Burchill, and he is with us to tell us his amazing story, his amazing journey, and the things that helped him get over some of the darkest hours. So let's bring him in. You can see him here. We're going to make him a little bigger. Hey, Dave, how are you? Thank you so much.
Bless you.
I love the meditating Viking. I think that's a fantastic name for your Instagram handle, and especially after listening to Dr. Joe, which you'll get into, I get it. It's very, very, very smart. So Dave, just tell us a little bit about yourself. What are you up to now? What do you do now? You're out there influencing in the community. What are you up to?
Well, my life revolves primarily around working with people with addiction, with mental health issues, and any aspect of the human self that they've not managed to get past and release themselves from those human aspects that are holding them hostage in the past through pain, suffering, and a loop of thinking and feeling and being trapped in those emotions, which create that the state of being and that person's reality.
Right, right. Now tell us, you sent me in the Instagram messaging, you sent me your story as a
Mhm.
young man and the losses you went through and the struggles you went through. I was like, wow, what some people go through is heartbreaking. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that, if you would?
My earliest experience was when I was 5 years old. My father was a military man who worked for the MOD, which is the Ministry of Defence in England.
Hmm, hmm.
He was on his way to work on a push bike. He was knocked from his push bike forward by a 24-ton lorry. His back was broken in 2 places, his neck broken in 3 places, or the other way around. I can't remember which. It's such a long
Wow.
time ago now.
Right.
And was left as a tetraplegic, so he's paralysed from the neck down.
Mm.
He went off to Stoke Mandeville for 3 years, which is a specialist spinal injuries unit in England, in Stoke.
Hmm.
And then when he came home, Mum was actually working as a qualified midwife and nurse, and we had an extension built on the back of the house.
Hmm.
We had him back home, and Mum effectively nursed him 24/7
Wow.
at home. Then when I was 11, we were away camping, and he passed away
Mm.
due to pneumonia. He'd been chronically ill a number of times during the time of his spinal injury. As I've now come to understand and know, that he was actually stressing about us going away on holiday, and the stress actually compromises the immune system
Sure. Hmm.
in a quite a dramatic way. So he passed away when I was 11, and then very, very shortly after, about 6 months, my older brother, who was 3 years and 9 months,
Hmm.
who I was then looking to as possibly as a guardian or a father figure, then started to groom me, abuse me, and then rape me, sexually abuse me and rape me, and that happened between 11 and 14. I got into martial arts around about 11 touching 12. One of my school pals asked me to go with him to a class because he felt like a wally going by himself. 6 weeks later, he dropped out. 20. By the time I was 26, I was then a county champion, jiu-jitsu champion, 2
Wow.
times. broke my hand in the qualifier, this hand, fractured this knuckle and pushed this knuckle back, and actually won the championship and the tournament with a broken hand. So broke the hand in the qualifier, and then in the same day actually won the tournament with a broken hand.
That's a tough guy. Wow.
So what I found was all of my hurt and all of my anger and all of my upset, I actually channeled into the martial arts. I was lucky enough to, once I'd got enough experience under my belt, no pun intended, by the time I was 14, I actually caught my brother had another pop at me, and I caught him with an absolute beauty of an uppercut and caught him just right underneath the chin. And from that day, he never touched me again. And I remember his eyes rolling back into his head and his knees folding out from underneath and him just falling down.
Good for
like
you.
A sack of potatoes. And from that day on, he never laid another finger on me. But in all that time, I was programmed and brainwashed to believe that to believe that nobody else would believe me, nobody else would take. If I was to tell anyone else, that nobody would actually believe anything that I would say, because I'd been manipulated and programmed in such a way that if I was to tell anyone, he said, "Well, I'm the older brother. Nobody's going to believe you. You're nothing."
Right. Right.
So, and that didn't actually come out until I was 30. But in that time, so from about 15 to about 26 years ago, I had 4 attempts on my life, and I've been sectioned twice. One of them was compulsory. If when they take you in, like against your will, I can't remember the exact term.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Because you're deemed as a danger to yourself or a danger to others.
Oh, is it like an involuntary admission?
That's the one. Yes, involuntary. Yeah. And the other one was a voluntary. I actually admitted myself.
Got it.
So, and it was around about 15 that I started drinking. I'd had some experience with cannabis, and all through my teenage years, I drank. And then when I got into my adult life, I experimented with pretty much every single drug that you can think of, apart from the only one that I didn't ever touch, which actually scared the bejesus out of me, was heroin. So I never touched that. I'd smoked crack cocaine on a pipe twice. And on both occasions, it made me feel so ill, I never visited that one again. I used to party a lot as well, with ecstasy, some cocaine as well. So I pretty much tried everything. But my go-to was always alcohol. And the alcohol was just something I could never, ever control. And it wasn't until I started to learn more about myself now that I'm coming up 3 years sober in February next year.
Oh, congratulations. Good for you.
Bless your kind heart. That I really opened the box to myself, and I started to learn. Once I started to learn about myself and what I was actually capable of in the context of learning, that my learning actually accelerated at an exponential rate. It wasn't just a steady curve. It just suddenly peaked and just suddenly took off. And what I came to understand was learning about the brain, and that when we're suffering from PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress, there are certain parts of the brain which are fired off and certain parts of the brain which are dulled down, that don't effectively get used, which I was completely unaware of. So the amygdala, which is responsible for your fight, flight, freeze, becomes thickened, which is the part of the brain which is fired from PTSD. And the hypothalamus, which is responsible for temperature regulation, blood pressure, emotional regulation, but also learning as well, is downregulated, which I didn't know. So as I started to come out of my addiction, all of my PTSD symptoms started to bubble to the surface. And I didn't have any other tools at my disposal at that time to really have a way of processing those emotions. And so, and it was purely by chance that I came across somebody called Dr. Joe Dispenza, because I'd been through the NHS system so many times. And the NHS is, I feel, sadly, massively broken and
Yeah.
corrupt in quite a lot of ways as well, because there's so much mismanagement of money.
Right.
And I'd be bounced from pillar to post, and I hadn't really gotten the answers from any doctors or any specialists, and not really given any proper therapy. So I got to the point where I was sick and tired of being
Right.
sick and tired.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
So I said, well, I'm going to learn this myself. So I started buying books, and then one of the jobs that I went into was not great, wasn't glamorous at all, but it gave me the opportunity to learn whilst I was working. It's called a civil enforcement officer, which is just a posh name for a traffic warden.
Okay.
And nobody likes traffic wardens, unfortunately, because there's a stigma that's attached to them. So
Really?
I would only give people tickets unless I absolutely had to give them a ticket.
Right.
And if I could show them a way of not getting a ticket, finding a loophole, then I'd do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I came to understand that there's different types of learning. So static learning, you only absorb about 13 to about 16%, which is like kids sitting in a classroom.
Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Then you have kinesthetic, which is actually engaging with using your hands and actually being involved, which jumps up to about 37%. Then when you're actually engaging all of your physiology, so using both hemispheres of the brain together, so using, all four limbs, like when you're walking,
Right.
It jumps up to 97%.
Okay.
So whilst I was walking up to 10 hours a day, to sometimes 10 miles a day, I'd have a wireless headset in, and I'd be listening to podcasts or seminars and
Gotcha.
YouTube, and I would literally or audiobooks. So for 10 hours, I'd be downloading this information whilst I'm walking around. And if somebody had to engage with me, I'd just go click, just pause it. So for probably about 6-7 months, and I don't know how many hours that is, I would be listening to 4 or 5 hours of an audiobook or a seminar from Dr. Bruce Lipton about the biology of belief. So I started to learn about epigenetics. I started to learn about go.
Mm-hmm.
So,
very interesting.
Incredibly so. So your environment, and this is something which is really, really important, which I really want to touch on, is your environment is so important for your healing. So and something that I learned is you can't get well in the same environment that made you sick.
Yep.
So things like your occupation. So if you've got a crappy boss or you've got crappy colleagues, those are elements. If you're in that environment for 8 hours a day, that's going to be firing off your PTSD. Your PTSD is going to be putting your body into your sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight, flight, or freeze.
Right, right.
So the body can't then re-regulate itself by returning to homeostasis, which affects your immune system. Because with the fight, flight, or freeze, the seat of your immune system is in your intestinal tract. Now, a lot of people don't actually realize that we've got 100 billion neurons in the brain, 40,000 in the heart, but 100 million in your gut.
Wow.
So it's actually your second brain, and this is the seat of your immune system. So if people are spending 8 hours a day in a stress response, like they're trying to run away from a saber-toothed tiger, but they can't return to homeostasis, the body down-regulates the genes that create growth and repair, and up-regulates the proteins that create disease and illness.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Wow.
So then people wonder why they've got IBS or constipation or diarrhea.
Right. So true.
Yeah.
That makes so much sense. I'm going to hire you for me. Wow. That is amazing. I'm just like, I'm a nurse. I've been a nurse for far too long. And I you never stop learning. It's funny what you say about the NHS, and, here in the US, we have our own healthcare issues. And I think what breaks my heart about healthcare is, or the medical system as it is, it's not focused on prevention. It's only focused on problem first. And now how do we get rid of it? And there's no education on nutrition or all these quote unquote alternative therapies, which were honestly hundreds of years ago, the original therapies, you know what I mean? But now we're all about, just medicine and prescribing. And so it's interesting to hear this.
Therapies themselves down-regulate the immune system.
Right.
It's the same corticoids that they use for transplant patients.
Yes.
is the reason why they use that is so that when a patient receives a transplant, like a transplanted heart from another person, so that the body doesn't reject that heart, they use corticoids. And one of the stress hormones is cortisol.
Yep. You
So
got
that
it.
actually downregulates the immune system.
You got it. That's exactly right.
So they treat inflammation with corticoids. They treat pain with corticoids. You know, the
Which,
list is endless.
right. It's interesting. That's very interesting, and it sort of compounds the issue.
Indeed.
So tell me, did the pandemic for you during this time, did you feel like it made things worse, or do you feel like you had already adjusted the way you think prior to that, so you were just exercising that during this time?
I
Or
was lucky enough
Mhm.
to get out of the job just as the pandemic hit. So
Gotcha.
I suppose I was just the only way I can sort of analogize it, if you like. Sorry, that's not
Mhm.
even a word. Is I was just turning a corner. So I'd managed to gain, I don't know, maybe hundreds of thousands of hours, maybe not, maybe tens of thousands of hours, not quite hundreds of thousands, but tens of thousands of hours from literally just downloading this information 10 hours a day, every
Amazing.
single day, 5 days a week, 36 hours a week. And then I managed to get out of the job just as the pandemic hit, and
Got
that
it.
gave me the opportunity to almost. I was very, the way I see it, I was very lucky that it created a bubble for me that I could just stay in my apartment and I could learn. And from
Yep.
that point, I treated my day as if I was at work, but I would spend 8 hours a day studying.
Is it? Yeah, it's
So,
almost like learning a new language in
yeah,
another country, full immersion, just
100%.
yeah, marinating in it all day long. That's fabulous. There's a silver lining. There's a silver
Mm.
lining. It's funny, as horrible as the pandemic has been, everyone does have a silver lining story about what they were able to do during that time. So that's very interesting. So then you came across Dr. Joe. Tell us what you learned from Dr. Joe, because Joe Dispenza.
Wow, the man changed my
Amazing.
life.
Yep. Amazing.
Man changed my life. Well, I came about his story through it was a guy called Tom Billieu that runs like an interview page called Impact Theory. And the interview wasn't actually that, it was just like a snippet. It was about 10 or 15 minutes long, talking about Joe, where he was on the biking portion of a triathlon, and he'd been hit by a 4x4 from the back, and he'd been propelled from his bike, and he had fractured a number of his vertebrae, and he was told by a number of specialists that if he didn't have this specific surgery called a Harrington rod surgery, that he would never walk again, that he would spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair. And he was, I think he's a chiropractor, so he's got an understanding of anatomy and physiology and biology as well. So
Right.
he knows has his own extensive understanding of human workings.
Gotcha.
And said the intelligence that made the body can also heal the body. So he decided to go into himself and what he calls, or what sometimes is known as the dark side, the dark night of the soul. So he said, well, I'm in this bed, I can't go anywhere, I can't do anything, so I'm going to imagine and mentally rehearse
Yes.
repairing my body through the power of thought.
Yes.
Within 9 weeks, he was back on his feet. Within 12 weeks, he was back training. And I could not believe it. Sorry, excuse me.
That's okay.
So sorry.
That's okay.
12 weeks back training after a serious spinal injury. I was just like,
Wow.
I could not believe. So as soon as I saw that, that just lit me, and I just wanted to learn as much as I could. And I recently found out in the last 18 months that I'm probably high functioning autistic as well. So my brain works in different ways.
Yep.
And I learn by immersion. So I get very, very passionate about certain things, and I want to learn everything I can, and then I move on to something else. And that's exactly what I've been doing for the last 3 years. So I started to understand that everything is connected. So how we think, how we feel creates our state of being, and our state of being creates our personality, and our personality creates our personal reality.
Correct.
So if I'm thinking and feeling and I'm suffering as an addict, if I change the way that I think incrementally over a period of time, if I start to adjust my emotions, because everything starts with a thought. So your thinking creates your feeling creates your emotions, your emotions creates your behavior, then your behavior creates your habits, then your habits become your destiny. So everything, which is crazy, right?
It's so true.
It's so true.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking I literally just have to get back to understanding what is causing me to think and feel this way.
Right.
So then I started to learn about what's going on with my brain. I wanted to understand the symptoms of PTSD, what part of my brains are firing, what's happening in my central nervous system, what biochemicals, what hormones are being fired off or secreted from parts of my brain or parts of my body, which is now affecting my physiology. Because my thinking and feeling is affecting my physical body. It's making me physically ill just by thought alone. So if my thinking is making me ill, then my thinking can make me well.
Exactly.
So if we have trials of a placebo and somebody gets given a sugar pill, and if that sugar pill sounds and that person can't pronounce it, or it's more expensive, or the physician that's prescribing that pill is more convincing and more passionate about this pill, the chances of that person believing that what they're taking is an actual pharmaceutical drug jumps up to 70 to 80%. They're creating their own pharmacology from their bodies by thought alone, just by the power of belief.
Yeah. No, they've proven that. You're absolutely
100%.
right. It's amazing.
So that's known as the placebo. So if we think the other way, then that's the nocebo, which is what Dr. Bruce Lipton talks about.
Oh, Lipton. Yeah. Okay. Wow. Now I haven't looked him up. I didn't hear that name. So I'm going to look him. I listened to Joe Dispenza and I was blown away and said to myself, I needed him.
They all worked together
20
actually,
years
Bruce
ago.
Lipton and Dr. Joe. Yes, they're good friends.
Yeah. Yeah. They clearly have tapped into something that's so desperately needed. So when I was listening to Dr. Joe, it was rehearsing what you're after through your mind, whatever that goal is, whether it's a personal goal, a career goal, or even physical, a physical injury. When you are rehearsing those thoughts through your mind, even if it's not happening at the moment, you're creating in the pathway for it to happen. It's
100%.
Yeah. So I was like, "Ooh, I'll be doing more of that." So,
because
and I'm going to get his book.
The mind and the body can't actually differentiate between an imagined event and the event actually taking place.
Right.
The mental rehearsal, because every time we think or we feel a certain way, nerve endings are wired together. So we're now creating new synaptics and new connections in the brain.
Right.
And by mentally rehearsing, even by mentally rehearsing in our brain, playing a piano, somebody then goes off and plays a piano that has never played piano, has a proven greater output as much as 20% more than the person that can actually play a piano.
Right.
Which is crazy. And I use it with my clients with as a personal trainer. I use it myself whenever I personal train. I've got it on the Instagram page when I was about to do a 240 kilo squat that I'd never stepped under before, and I only had 4 reps that I'd managed to achieve. So I'd go in, I'd stand under the machine or just in front of the machine, and I would mentally rehearse in my mind me doing the actual exercise, visualize myself doing it, did the set, and I actually got 6 reps out. So I created another 20%, roughly, give or take, another 20% greater output.
Yeah.
It's without stunning. That mental rehearsal.
Yeah. Yeah. That's stunning. Yeah. We're at the end of our conversation here. I'm going to be putting up the pictures of Bruce Lipton's book and Joe Dispenza's book, because these are resources that people need to know are out there. And look at where you've come from. I mean, you came from such a young man to lose your dad, to being abused by your brother in the most horrific way, and then substance abuse. And then you were like, enough already. And then the pandemic actually, like you said, created a bubble for you to do that studying and immerse yourself into this this new therapy from these two gentlemen is just, it's amazing. And look at what you're doing now. Tell me about what you're doing now. Yeah.
It wasn't even just that. It was because once you tap into YouTube or anything, the algorithm of the programming brings up other people. So I follow Ed Milet, Aubrey Marcus, Tom Bilyeu. You know, the list goes on, and then other people that are being interviewed by these people. They're specialists of their field, and so I'm like, wow, this guy's got a book. So straight onto Amazon, I'll buy his book. So I buy his book. So if somebody's got 10 years of experience or 20 years of knowledge and experience, so I read that book in a week. I've just now downloaded 10 years of experience.
Yes, you're right. That's a cool way to think of it. Yes.
You know, all of my wages have gone on books. And if it's not books, I'm watching YouTube or I'm watching a seminar. Anything that I'm constantly drip feeding into my brain to upgrade my consciousness, my knowledge, and then I install that those aspects into myself, and then I give them to my clients as well.
That's amazing. And so now you're a life coach. What are all your titles? Tell me what you have.
So, primarily personal trainer.
Yeah.
But there's aspects of the life coaching that feed into the personal training. So like life coaching, because there's always an emotional element that's driving somebody wants to change the aspect of of their physical self, the identity that they're not happy with. So, and that can sometimes be because they've been comfort eating, which again is a coping mechanism in the same context. The neural pathways of being an alcoholic like myself, the same neural pathways are being fired of somebody that comfort eats.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same, because we're firing off to try and self-soothe or comfort ourselves through food, through alcohol, through shopping, through pornography, through playing video games. Same pathway gets fired, and it's all down to the same hormone, which is dopamine. And the more that we fire off that hormone, then the threshold actually gets raised. And just like an addict, we need to keep filling that gap. And as the threshold gets pushed further and further, you need more and more and more of it to continue to get that same physiological feeling.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And I have two dear friends of mine who have been sober now, one for 28 years and one for 4, I believe it is. And they're amazing. And my struggle. Sorry.
No, it's my bad.
That's okay. No worries. My struggle has always been food and weight. So, and we talk about that now. You know, I don't want to equate the struggle of alcohol or drugs to food, but I think it's the hyper focus, like just breaking your thoughts and your mind away from that next drink, that next hit, that next meal. You know what I mean? That's a real struggle. So I was so happy to come across you and learn about this Joe Dispenza and Bruce Lipton and the others, that I'm going to go do this work. I'm going to go read everything and try to, bring this into my life. So you're amazing. I just want to thank you for coming on. You're such an example. I mean, you've been through the worst things that people can go through, the most heartbreaking things, especially from the people you trust or you're looking to for help. That's just a whole different kind of sting, and then you've found a way to make it positive, become better, and then now helping other people. I think it's amazing, truly.
It's what I found when I started to meditate was the hardest part was getting still with my thoughts and my feelings. And there's a massive misconception about meditation. It's about clearing the mind. It's not about clearing the mind. It's about becoming an objective observer of your mind.
Okay.
So, and also understanding the brain waves as well. So where we are now, we're in beta, which is 16 cycles to 12 cycles per second. But when somebody is suffering from a PTSD trigger, then somebody shoots up into high beta, which is 20 cycles to 40 cycles per second. And the way that I sort of, the analogy that I describe is our thoughts and our feelings or our emotions are very much like sitting on the side of a highway. And when we're in high beta, we're in high arousal. And when we're in high arousal, then the central nervous system is interpreting that our external environment is unsafe. And so then that pushes the body into the into the sympathetic, which is your fight, flight, or freeze. Just by thought alone. So the meditation is the key to actually slowing the brain waves down. So when we're in high beta, that's like your emotions and your feelings and everything racing by. You 100 miles an hour. There's no way you're going to be able to engage with any of those emotions because how triggered and how fast everything is moving.
Right.
So if we can get our brains into a theta state, which is about 8 to 4 cycles per second, now that traffic, those emotions are now traveling at 30 miles an hour. I can actually get a really good look at what's going past. Now I can understand what that thought or that feeling is. Now I can understand what that emotion that's connected to that thought is causing me to feel or think this way. I can become an objective observer because I'm slowing my brainwave down. But theta is also the doorway between the conscious mind and the unconscious mind.
Wow. Yeah, you are an encyclopedia of information. I'm learning so much right now. That's truly, truly amazing. David, I want to thank you for coming on. We're hitting up against our time here, but you have been a wealth of information for people listening because so many people are facing these very dark spaces and they don't. Where's the light? Where's the way out? They are feeling hopeless. And this episode is so full of hope and so much is right within your control if you just understand how to do it. And so again, I just want to thank you. We're going to be putting up all the names of the people you've studied. We're going to do that at the end. And I can't thank you enough. This is going to be excellent. I can't wait for our viewers to see you. Okay, my friend. Thank you so much. You have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's been a real pleasure to meet you and to share my knowledge and wisdom with you.
Thank you so much.
We'll
see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.